and welcome to the Blue Line Field Training Program. This program and this tutorial is designed to help you integrate new training officers into your agency, and the instructions here are made to be simple, easy to understand, and we think we'll surely enjoy how the program works. First, you'll notice the login screen. You'll have your agency name up here at the top, making sure that you're in the right place. And once you have that, you will use your email and your password, and you will go ahead and sign in to the field training program. Once in the program, you're going to notice that you are at the activity training dashboard. The active training dashboard is what tells you exactly the details of the people who are in training. So over here on the left, you're going to see the trainees. You have Chris Johnson, and then you have Joe Smith, and you can see what phase they're in. So they're both in phase 2 right here. Hours left in the phase, they have 56 hours left, and at first glance you can look that then phase 1 they had an average of 3.24 as their training score, and in phase 2 they had a average training score of 3.52. On the right, you'll see the percentage completed of their entire training process. So you get a quick glance of where they are in the progression of their whole program. So they've completed 47%, and got 52, almost 53% left in the training program. If you want to take a look at, once you dig into the details of the trainee, you will click on the trainee button. So we're going to, we'll look over here at Chris Johnson, and if you'll notice, Chris Johnson shows to be in a remedial, which is a setting that we will go over, but he is in the remedial program, and so we're going to click on this button right here and get into the details of that trainee and dig into the statistics. So as you can tell, you see you are in the trainees detail page. It shows the hours and shifts that are currently in that phase that they're in, and he's in phase 2. So he's got 56 hours left in phase 2, and he's got 5 shifts, and that's based on a 12-hour shift, but it can be customized to any agency's shift timing. If you have an 8-hour shift or a 10-hour shift, you can adjust that as well. You also have the total assigned hours in phase 2. He was assigned 160 hours for just phase 2, and then the total training hours remaining for the entire training period is 296. He's 47% into the training program, as you can see, and then the total field training hours assigned to him throughout the entire training program is 560. So out of that 560, he's 47% complete. And then below, you'll also see the total remedial hours completed, and as you noticed on the previous page that he is in remedial, and that'll show up here as well. So he's got that 20 hours into the remedial. So what you want to look at now is this graph here at the bottom. The first thing that you're going to see that loads up in the graph down here at the bottom is the current phase that the trainee is in, and currently that trainee is in phase 2. And so when you first load it, you're going to get the actual current phase, and the lines that you're looking at here, those are going to be the average of all the scores within that current training phase. So as we move on, the options above, you have phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then a combination of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and last DOR, and so on. So right now we're going to focus on that phase 2 for a second and look and see where we are. The first thing you will probably notice is that there is a blue line with their scores, and then a red line that is the minimum for those scores. and those minimums that you can see here, those can be adjusted by your agency as well, whatever you want those minimums to be. If you mouse over the dots on the graph, it shows you exactly what that specific category is. And as you can tell, two areas there that are below the minimum: geography and attitude towards police work. Two things you may be looking at right off the bat going, we may have a problem in that, since we are deep into phase 2, and so that's right off the bat. So you can also go back and compare phase 1 by clicking the button up here on phase 1, and then you can see that the minimum line has dropped there in phase 1, and so the minimum I think is about 2.25 maybe, and you can see how they scored in those same areas in that phase. And then again, you can mouse over those areas and see what category is what, and where they're lacking or where they're actually doing well. So go back to phase 2. You can, we talked about those drops. Phase 3. Now he hasn't gotten to phase 3 or phase 4, but you can also see the minimums that go up and down when they do go into those phases. That's where the minimums will be. If you want to see both or all the phases together, you choose that phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you'll be able to see a graph with different colors that show you where they are and where they've been. And you can compare the phases together. So generally you'd want to see the light blue graph, which is phase 2. Generally you want to see higher scores, but in this case you see some areas where they received a lower score in the second phase than they did in the first phase. And those are some problem areas again that you would want to address. But as long as you're looking at an uptick and having that light blue line above the dark blue line, shows that there is progression between phase 1 and phase 2. Next is the last DOR. From the last DOR is just the last entry. If you wanted to look at it and see, hey, was there a problem on that day that they had? And clearly there's this drop right here in report writing. So there was obviously an issue there that the field training coordinator could quickly see. Then you have the last 14 days. Now this is important because sometimes you will have trainees that don't do so well in the beginning of their phase. So at the beginning, let's say they had some problems with a certain area and they received some really low scores. Well, since we're basing these on averages, sometimes it's really hard to bring that average up. And we all know that we have trainees that struggle for a little bit, and then one day something clicks and the trainee picks it up, he gets it, and then all of a sudden he's good to go. And so this last 14 days is more of a basis of what the trainee has picked up and what they're learning, and that's just their true analysis of where they are without considering the low scores that they may have received at the beginning of the training program. So you got the last 14 days, and then if you go over, you can also compare that by clicking on the phase that they're in, and in this case phase 2, and you can compare them. Remedial is it's a system to where if you have a issue with an FTO and they seem like they may be struggling to even make it through the program, you can put them into remedial. The good thing about remedial is you still track their scores, but everything else freezes. The phase that they're in freezes, the time in training freezes, and you get to actually just take this time to try to get corrective measures taken to get that trainee back on track, and then pick up where you left off in the phase that they were in. So he's in phase 2, and he was placed into remedial to fix some problems. He gets his remedial scores, and you're going to be able to see the difference between those two. Now if you want to actually say, okay, here's my low area interview and interrogation skills and accuracy and completeness or some areas. You definitely want to add those. But if you want to actually see the two phases together, the phase that they're in and their remedial scores, you can click on the button for current phase and remedial and look at them side by side and see that, are we progressing in certain areas? Are we not progressing? Are we doing worse in certain areas? And generally you want to see the red remedial graph slowly rise above the problem areas in the DOR, especially for those that are below that red line. So you move your mouse over those buttons, you can see, okay, investigative skills in this case. He's got a 3.5 remedial, but he's got a 3 in there, so he's brought that score up just a little bit. But there are some that he's also lacking in that they're going to have to work on. So that pretty much covers your remedial. Again, it doesn't count against their time and it doesn't count against their phase scores. It's almost like a pause in the process. So being able to compare those two, the phase they're in and the remedial, it's going to be very beneficial to be able to tell where their deficiencies are and how to be able to overcome just those certain areas, and they can focus on those areas to get that trainee up to where they need to be. So the area in here where we have these categories, they're obviously listed below the graph, but you can just move your mouse over those buttons and read those categories straight from there without trying to line up the actual graphs. Makes it easier. But as you can see, control of conflict, lines up here, but it actually lines directly above. Just move your mouse over there and you can see which category that is. Next, we're going to move down to the actual submitted daily observation reports for that trainee. On the left here, you will notice the dates of which the trainees are, the FTO, the phase, and whether or not they're in remedial. And as you can tell, the last two phases here, that subject is in remedial, and that's why those were marked yes on there. And it'll correspond with the front page and what's up top. So if we dig into a DOR, you can see that it is loaded up. It is marked remedial, so when you print these, you will have that record showing that this was a remedial daily observation report, and again, doesn't go towards their phase scores, but it does keep the record so that you can track the actual progress. I always refer to that as some type of it's a way to monitor the situation, but you're putting their training numbers on pause. So the DORs are designed to give you all the information about where they are in their training. Still has all the training hours, it has all their scores, and it has all the notes that we're going to soon find out how to enter these notes into a daily observation report to be saved and later printed and have that information on file. Some agencies want to just keep the information on the system and refer back to it there if they need to, but I do recommend printing the DORs and keeping those in their training file or personnel file in case there's ever an open records request. We did get logged out somehow, so we're going to log back in here. Jump back into Chris Johnson where we were. But as we pick the DOR, again, the information, you definitely want to print that. So we're going to jump back to the main dashboard here, and again, you can go look at Joe Smith, look at the graph for him as well. You can tell it's a little bit different, seems to be doing a little bit different, a little better in the training process, not in remedial, and so he has more of a straight line graph on his. So Next, we are going to be talking about entering those daily observation reports. So up top, you'll click on that DOR entry, and you're going to choose your trainee's name there from the list. So anybody who is an active trainee will be in the drop-down list. You are going to choose the date instead of just having the system pick today's date. There's sometimes when you start a shift on one day and end on another, so you may go back and choose the date that you actually started the shift. You'll enter their work hours for the day. You'll choose the shift. Now these shifts are labeled Bravo days and Bravo nights for this agency, but you can name those. They're customizable to whatever you want to name them. The phase of training, orientation, and whatnot, we're going to choose phase 2. Remedial, obviously this is where you saw where we had a remedial. If you choose yes, and we'll continue to leave that person on remedial for the time being. Now this last shift with recruit, you definitely want to choose this if this is your last shift. What that does is it sends an email to the trainee and the coordinator so that that trainee can actually fill out a trainer observation report, and they get to actually rate them in certain categories such as leadership, training quality, patience, and different things, and those areas are customizable as well. So be sure you check yes or no if that is the last shift with that recruit. And then we'll move down to, is the DOR complete? So by default it does say no, save for later, but if you are sure that your DOR is complete and you're done with it, you would click on submit completed, and that way it'll save it and it will no longer be editable. But if you do need to go back and edit the DOR later on in the shift, or you want to take notes as you go, you definitely want to choose the no on there. So the notes section they're set up for each individual area, so you can type in notes for that one area. So if you have a situation within that topic and you wanted to type something in there and it's related to that topic, that's where that would go, would be in the notes section for that general area. The only required field out of those is going to be the notes at the bottom. Those are just general notes, kind of how the FTO did, or I'm sorry, how the training did throughout the day. And you just put your general notes in there. As you go through, you just want to finish that up, and then once you're done, you'll click on submit and have that DOR completed. You can click the submit button at the bottom, or you can go back to the top. So NA is not applicable. You'll notice that they all say not applicable. They are default set to that. So if you do not observe anything in that category during that daily observation, you would just leave that non-applicable. And if you want to rate them on something, obviously 1 through 5, you'd pick whatever rating you wanted to pick. Now NRT, there on the right, that's not responding to training. And if you have an issue there where a recruit is not responding to training, that may trigger an issue where you need to put them into a remedial situation for that category, or maybe have some time of extra training for that category. But not responding to training is a last ditch effort to identify that the trainee is not performing and not progressing in that area. They're just not responding to the training. So that's when you would click the NRT. So it looks like we got our DOR completely filled out. Once we get it all done, check our date, we can go ahead and hit submit. You'll notice it says that it is submitted successfully, and you go in and it takes you to that same detail page where we were previously, and you can see the graph. And the reason it takes you back to this page is so that you can go back to that DOR. Now we only entered in one thing. We entered in that general appearance. We left all the other categories not applicable, so there's no data for those, so that's why you see that that's blank there. Just the first one, general appearance, is the only one we entered. So we want to print the DOR, so we click that date. Now you will see the DOR is not complete, so it shows you that on the top that this is an incomplete DOR. So what you want to do if you're done and you say, okay, I do want to complete the DOR, you go back to the DOR entry and it will recognize that you have an incomplete DOR. It will load that DOR up for you automatically. I have the trainee's name and information, date, and whatnot. So if you need to change anything about the DOR, say for example you entered something incorrectly or you were just not finished with it, you need to enter. But you do have to go in and choose the last shift option. Again, and if it's not the last shift, just choose no. And then if the DOR is complete, you'll choose yes, submit completed. So we're going to change a couple of things here that we will say we didn't get a chance to do originally. So we added a few scores, changed the general appearance score from 5 to 4, and I think we're satisfied with that. And then we're going to go ahead and click on submit, and then you'll see the DOR updated. And so when we go back to the DOR page, you're going to notice that the things that we changed, it's no longer an incomplete DOR, and then we changed the shift, I think, to Bravo days, and then the scores that we changed and the other 3 scores that we added show up in the daily observation report. So next, once we're done with that, you can always just go back. If you've got another DOR you need to enter, you're free to enter that DOR because all your other DORs are completed. It'll only allow you to do one DOR at a time. So if you have one incomplete, then you have to go back and make sure you complete it first. FTO stats, and so this is statistics. This is going to be more of an administrative view, but if you want to look at how your actual training officers are doing and how they're scoring, this is your FTO stats. And this is what gives Blue Line FTO a little bit of an advantage over other training softwares, because this is where you are going to identify issues with your trainees. So for example, if you have a trainee that grades high, a trainee that grades low, we all know we've had one trainee that goes from one FTO to another, and one FTO says he's doing great and the other FTO says no, he has issues. I'm pretty sure we've all seen that, and this is where we can identify where are those issues with the trainers and why are they so off between their grading styles, and maybe somebody who has a pet peeve grades more strict than another FTO. So that's where we are with this and how we can get that information. So as you see on the left, you're going to pick your FTO there on the left, and I think you'll be able to see the hours and you'll be able to see the last date that they picked. But here we're going to go and just I think we're just going to pick an FTO that has quite a bit of hours, and so why don't we pick looks like we'll go ahead and pick Steve Cambridge here and take a look at the details here of this FTO. He's got 480 hours, so we should have some good data in there. So the statistics for Steve Cambridge, obviously you're going to see the hours how many hours they've given in the last 365 days, the average score they give in each phase. Now he's only trained in phase 1 and 2, but he gave a 3.63 in phase 2 and a 3.47 in phase 1, so you can kind of see that that's their average score that they give. You can also see the last trainee they trained with, which was Chris Johnson, and the last training date that they trained on. The training average or rating average is a 4.15, and you get a 4-star for that. And we'll go over that information in just a minute and how we get that data. But that's the rating that comes from the actual trainee. So we move down to the graph. you're going to notice that you're looking at an average of that FTO and their average scoring in those categories. Now the categories aren't actually listed, but you can mouse over those buttons and look at what category is what. The red line is all the other FTOs average. So all the other FTOs within the last 365 days, that red line indicates that's where they are. So you can look at this FTO and realize that he generally grades pretty well below the average. There's only really one spot where he grades above the average, and a couple of spots where he grades on the average, but in general he grades below average, which means he's generally harder on the trainees than he is with other FTOs. And so that's something to recognize in this graph when you look at the actual average across the board with other FTOs. And so again, it's something you may address. Why are they grading harder on them than others? Now, if you click on phase 1, these are, instead of having all the phases average, which is what we were previously looking at, you're looking at the grading just in phase 1 and how he grades. So generally he is still grading a little bit below that red line average from all the other FTOs. He's really hard on certain areas such as evidence collection, and he's hard on geography. He's tough on report writing, more so than the other FTOs. And again, this is an average, so it's not just one trainee. So looking at phase 2, again, he is still below that line. Seems to be grading hard in geography, orientation, and response time to calls. And so this may be something that's just he's a stickler on for that one area where FTOs may not be, the other FTOs may not be sticklers. Now he hasn't graded in phases 3 and 4, but you can obviously see where the average is inside those areas from other FTOs, and so as soon as he does grade, he'll have scores in there. If you want to look at them again together, you want to look at his phase 1 and phase 2 scores and how he grades, you can clearly see a pattern that he grades. Those lines, although they're not right next to each other, they do follow a very similar pattern and dip in the same areas and rise in the same areas of those categories. So when you talk about report writing or different things, like this dip there at the one that drops below the line, he clearly has a kind of a pet peeve for that, and both phases seems to score low on those. So if you're talking about the average of all the phases, and then you want to compare them to all the FTOs. So this isn't just individual phases, this is all average phases. This is where you see where the FTO is falling behind or falling under and grading stricter than the other FTOs, and that red line indicates that's the average from everyone else, not including the current FTO you're looking at. So next, we talked about the 5 stars up above and the actual rating. This comes from the trainee rating system. So we talked about that there was a rating of 4.15, and this is where we get these numbers. So when the trainee is finished with that FTO, that trainee gets to rate that FTO. And here you're going to get the last 4 trainees that graded that FTO, and you're going to, right now you're currently looking at the average, and the first thing that really pops in on the screen are the dips that you see. There are 2 major dips, and these are again averages between these last 4 trainees. So definitely something that is going to be something you'll want to address, because those are a problem that it seems like all the trainees, all 4 trainees, had the same opinion on when they graded it. So patience being one of them, and they also had an issue with the FTO's view of the department, which is generally not a good trait for a field training officer to not have a good view of the department. You don't want them passing on that stigma to the trainee, because they're obviously impressionable during the field training process. So if you look at, just say, Joey Hendricks here, you want to see just his scores, you can click on Joey and look at his graph individually and see where that person or that trainee felt that the FTO lacked in certain areas. Obviously, view of the department, patience, and so that corresponds almost pretty much what the average was as well. So patience leads by example, and view of the department scored 3s on. So you go over to Megan Logan. Again, similar. Patience again is another issue with that FTO in the view of the department. So clearly, even now that you have 2 FTOs having the same very low scores on those 2 areas, that's a red flag for that FTO. From there, you can move on to the other FTOs. You don't have to go in order. So Willie Nelson, he did a dip again in the patience area there, and gave a little bit higher score on that view of the department over here, but still a little bit low. And then Speedy Gonzalez had also a very low score for patience and view of the department. So really looking at those, you have a problem. When you look at that 365-day average, you have a problem with those dips below those categories. So going back to the FTO status board, maybe we'll pick a different FTO to look at. We did Steve, so now we'll do Casey Stone, and take a look at this FTO and see how they're doing. Now again, they've trained in phase 1 and phase 2, but what I'm first noticing here is that the FTO seems to follow the average FTO line pretty close. I don't see any huge dips or deviations where it's too far above or too far below, and to me this speaks that FTO is pretty good. Now, as we look at the individual phases 1 and 2, you see, these 2 lines, they run parallel, but you notice that they don't cross each other. One doesn't dip below the other as far as how they are grading. So it seems like there's some consistency, that from phase 1 to phase 2 there's progress, and that's what you want to see when you're looking at these FTOs. You want to see the progress increase, and even if it's a slight increase, you just don't want to see a dip where things go down. But this FTO grades seems to be pretty fairly. Now the ratings that came from the actual trainees, again, they're following that average almost spot on. It's going across there, and that's what you want to see. You don't want to see any huge deviations like we did on the previous FTO. So this FTO seems to have a solid review from his trainees. We don't expect everybody to do 5s across the board. You want them to be sure that they are honest in their answers. Grading in 4s and 3s are acceptable, and because as they go across, those averages are going to show a true indication of what all the trainees together come up with. So like this one, Joey Hendricks gave a promptness a little bit lower on that one, but as you can tell, because we go on average, he didn't pick up, didn't affect his average score. So that way, you are one bad or one trainee that may have a grudge or doesn't like an FTO isn't going to affect their overall average because you take in consideration all the good scores from all the other trainees as well. So to me, this is a really good example of a good FTO with good results. So from there, that pretty much covers our FTO stats, and so we'll move on to administration. Now these are the things that are going to be not accessible to just the standard access for field training officers. This is going to be supervisors and admin and coordinators as well. So you're able to edit the DOR categories for your agency. You'll definitely want those set up at the beginning. The shift names and the minimums, those minimums that you see on the graphs, you can set those up there. And the DOR entry, or edit a DOR entry. So if you have an entry that's bad, add a trainee, delete a trainee, change the categories on how the trainees review the trainers. You can change those categories to whichever your agency would like to evaluate. Editing oral boards, which is a new thing. We're getting into the oral board grading system here as well, and so that your agency can set up those questions in the oral boards as well. FTO access and password reset will also be there in the admin section so that they can change the access and change their passwords if they need to, or if they need to set up a new FTO, you can do that there. So this is the category section. Again, you go through the list and you can change them, add them, do whatever. We just recommend that you choose, once you choose them, you stick with them so that they are the same throughout the training process. Here you're going to be able to change your shift names. This agency uses Alpha Days, Alpha Nights, Bravo Days, Bravo Nights. The minimums as well. You want to be careful not to have minimums that are too high so that it's not easy for the good trainees to achieve, but you don't want them too low so that you have bad trainees that make it through the field training process. So you want to make sure that you get both of them set just right. I would recommend leaving those where they are so that you get a good balance between the two. To edit a DOR entry, you're going to choose the actual trainee that you did, and we'll do the Tess Johnson. That's the one I think we just entered there. Pick the date. You're going to get a warning that says that you're about to change a DOR that was submitted by that person. And so the first thing you're going to notice over here is, do you want to update only, or do you want to delete the DOR? And so to go in there to make a change, you can only change the data that's entered. You can change the date, the hours worked, but if you enter the wrong name or anything, you'd want to delete that DOR and start over. So here we'll change a couple of different things. You can even go through, add notes, change notes, or you can even change, somebody entered a score wrong in a category, they can change that from a 4 to a 5, and then be able to go say, okay, that's the way I want it. We're going to do an update only, and then once we get that done, we'll update that DOR. You'll get a success, and then you'll notice that that DOR has been updated. Next, we're going to run down here to the what we call the we're adding a new trainee. The first name, last name, just enter in that box in the email, and you're going to enter the hours for that trainee. And once you have your observation hours and then each phase, you'll be able to do those based on if a trainee is going to be in an expedited program because they have experience from another department. You get to choose the amount of hours you want for that. If you want to edit or delete a trainee, you will come to the screen and be able to go in there and say, okay, I want to edit these hours. You may increase them or you may decrease the hours per phase. Or again, like I said, just delete the trainee altogether. Here, you're going to be able to edit the actual TFOR categories. These are the categories in which your trainees rate the trainers. You get to ask those questions and make those changes as well. Same goes for oral board questions. If you want to randomly go in and change the oral board questions to different scenarios or different definitions, you go in here. You'll be able to change those very easily so that when you go up to assess on your next DOR, you'll have all the new data that you submitted and put in there will be available immediately. So try to make it as customizable as possible for every agency. Next is access to the FTOs, being able to give them different levels of access or deactivate their account. So as you'll notice, we have an inactive FTO. That means that FTO is not able to log in or make any DOR submissions. They have a standard account when their account is active. This one has a supervisor, and then Casey Stone has a coordinator admin access on those. So that gives you a breakdown, just kind of a quick view of who has what access. And so if you want to change that access, you'll just go over to that FTO's name. You'll click on that FTO and you can change it from active to inactive, or you can change them from standard to supervisor or vice versa. If they're updated their email address or if they need to change their password, they can come over, type in their own password, and then you just click update on the DOR, and that information is changed for them. Alright, so back to that, like I said, you have tester. We're going to make them active. We'll update that, and then when you go back to the list, you'll see that now FTO is back in active status. They're able to add DORs to the system. The new FTO sign up is takes you out of this, logs you out, and allows you to enter in a new FTO, or they can fill out the information themselves and allow you to. You'll receive an email, and then you can submit that access through the email, or you can log in here and do it. So in hiring, you'll have oral board set up, and what this is that if you have scheduled an oral board for a new applicant, you'll pick the date that you're going to do the board, type in the person's name, and then you will hit submit, and then that person will be scheduled for a oral board on the date that you picked. So pretty simple on setting up an actual oral board for a new applicant. So if you want to look at the upcoming oral boards, you're going to see the one that we just entered in there, and you're only going to be able to see oral boards that are upcoming. Past oral boards will not be listed on here, so it'll be from today's date forward. If you need to delete the DOR completely from the system, so they didn't make it or didn't show up, you can just click delete. But if you're ready to submit the oral board and conduct it, you'll have a set of instructions which are also customizable, and you'll see that the assessor is you as you are logged in the applicant's name, and then you read through the instructions, making sure that everybody grades the exact same way. And generally you want to start from 3, which is in the middle, and either grade up if the response is good, or grade down if the response is bad. If for any reason that the applicant did not answer the question or you were not in the room during the question, you would choose not applicable, just like you would on a DOR entry. But as you go through these, the DORs will then get filled out, and then you will end up with a grade by each assessor that is actually on the OR board. So the details on here, again, you get to put your comments in there. You don't have to read all that to them. But so if you want to go in and you want to look at the results of the DOR after they've been submitted by all the assessors, you're going to click on oral board results. Go down, pick the person you want to review their oral board. We'll click on new person here, and obviously you'll see 3 of the people picked to they recommended to hire that applicant, which was one of the questions on the oral board. But Summersmith, for whatever reason, even though gave a decent score, decided that she did not recommend to hire. Something about that oral board chose her said to not progress the subject on, and that's up to your agency whether or not they want to still progress. But that was that assessor's opinion. They scored a 4 out of 5.0, and then you obviously get the average graph of how the assessor, how the applicant did in the process. Now, if you obviously see that everybody kind of seemed to think that it was not such a good answer on the scenario-based welfare check that was on the oral board, and they got a pretty low score for that. They also got a lower score on the police officer traits and how the applicant answered that question. So you can break it down and look at the actual assessor. So Smash Scott had entered this information pretty much following right along the average line. So the blue line is the assessor, and the green dotted line is the average of the other assessors in there. So pretty much they stayed pretty close to assessing the exact same way, or assessing close to the average. And that's definitely something you want to see, making sure that your assessors are grading in the same capacity and the same ideas as everybody else. Rick Sanchez, again, still followed pretty close to the average of all the other assessors. In certain areas may have graded higher, may have graded lower, but again, still following along in those. Same thing with Smith. Maybe gave a little bit lower score in certain areas, but still stayed pretty close to the pattern of the average of all the other FTOs for that applicant. And so that's definitely a good oral board, and they all recognized the poor answers. The assessors, if you want to look at all of them together, generally you would like to hope that they are not completely off from each other, maybe 1 to 1.5 points here and there. Somebody may grade a 3 and somebody grade a 4. That's very common, but what you do want to or what you don't want to see necessarily is somebody grade a 5 and somebody grade a 2. There's something, if you get that, then somebody either misunderstood the answer or misunderstood the question when they were assessing the applicant. So it may be something you go back and discuss. Why is this score so much different than everybody else's score? And again, you may have bad assessors, and this is what the graphs are for. These are to tell you that you have assessors that are grading either with the average or well above or below the average. And so that's why you have all the assessors button there so you can compare them. If you want to click and print that, you can obviously choose to do so, and you can even choose which graph if you want the average or if you want all of them together. Print that for the file so that y'all can go back and take a look at it later and see if you decided you want to hire that applicant. So from there, that pretty much covers most of, if not all of the field training system, the Blue Line field training system. I hope that it was very informative for you. We would definitely like to set up uh, a demo for your agency, and if you want to try it out free of charge, maybe run a FTO and a trainee through the system, see how they like it, we would be more than happy to set that up for you. Just contact us at bluelinefto.com and we'll get it set up for you. Appreciate you watching the video.